Hey everybody, welcome back to the Plays and Fades YouTube channel. My timing is off today, but we are back for some Dana White Contender Series. We are on Season 7, Week 4. We're back on my channel, breaking down, as always, 11 p.m. Eastern with my main man, Liam. We are talking some fights. We got 5 fights ahead for this Tuesday night card, one that we're really looking forward to, some high-level bouts and some interesting spots we have to talk about. I'm really looking forward to doing so. But before we do, let's give some love to my co-host. This man competed in and about himself this weekend, Mr. LiamPicksFights. You can check that out on his YouTube as well. How are we doing, my man? How was your weekend?
Yeah, it was a good weekend, man. Happy to get back out there and scrap. It had been a little bit too long. I like to compete. I like to stay active. So it was fun. Great competitor that I went against. I had a blast and hope to get back out there again soon, my man. But we got plenty of fights to break down as well. And that's what I've been cramming in today, getting ready for this Contender Series card. And I'm looking forward to it, brother.
Hey, me as well. We do have ourselves a decent one at hand, one where the lines are going back and forth. I'm excited to hear what you have to say about it. Some kickboxers on there. We even got a Canadian thing going on it. So, as always, we're going to go over every single fight from a betting perspective. We'll recap it at the end, and we are alternating channels, right? So this week, the even weeks, we are on my channel here, and then Liam's on the odd weeks. But let's not waste too much more time. I want to shout out people hanging out. Cole's in here saying, let's kill it week 4. Mushrooms in here. I know we'll talk about parlays. We hit ours at UFC Singapore, a nice little plus, 2,200 there. So some fun stuff. So we'll try to do it again here, but let's not waste any more time. Let's dive into the very first fight of the night. And as we do so, let's bring up these odds we have here. And we have had the bout order shuffle around a bit for this card. So I'm happy to see it finally start to settle up. But we do have ourselves a fun fight at 155. We have the 5-1 Dylan Salvador versus the 7-1 Belgaroui. And I may have butchered that name, but this is going to be a fun fight for as long as it lasts here. It is one with 2 pretty solid prospects, I think, with different mentalities. I think here you have a guy in Dylan Salvador who is a former kickboxer, a guy who holds a nice win over Giga Chikadze, which is always nice to see, but someone who is looking to go in there and implement what you'd expect to be a striking heavy approach. He's a former kickboxer, great leg kicks when he does decide to do so, but you check that record, man. He's got submission wins. He's someone who likes to go out there and also round out his MMA skill set, a decent ground game back, and that seems to be a pretty good threat, right? When you have a guy who's as credentialed on the feet, along with the ability to go in there and mix in takedowns, that's always something you like to go see. Now, with that being said, it's not like he's perfect. He can be taken down. His takedown defense looks weak, and even at that, in his former kickboxing days, he can be hit, but that's something he's definitely going to show up here against Belgaroui, who is very aggressive himself, a very good striker in his own right, a guy who likes to strike, good body work in his own right, and good combinations. I like to see him push forward, walking against when he's the aggressor and having success on the feet that well, and can also implement his takedowns. What I see from Oki, though, is he's not the best off the back foot. He still has his own flaws in his own right, and I don't think him to be the most dynamic submission grappler. So what we have here is a guy who's a powerful striker in Oki, but is that enough to counteract the the kickboxing credentials of someone like Dylan Salvador? It seems like we do have a really polarizing matchup on our hands. So I'm going to pass it over to my co-host here, Liam. We do have ourselves a decent sized underdog here in Oki in what is bound to be a fun fight. What are your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, so I haven't had as much of a chance to do due diligence on this fight, right? So I always level with you guys. If I have, a lot to say, then I'll tell you guys. But if I don't have that much to say, then I'll be a little bit more brief. What I did notice is I always try and do things that are replicable over time, right? Like just how can I break down a fight card week to week? Because I do this stuff frequently. And so when I do that, right, Oki has the edge in terms of anthropomorphic advantages. That is something I like to look at. 1 inch taller here, 5'10" versus 5'9", 4-inch reach advantage, 73 inches versus 69 inches on the other side. And he's also 3 years younger here, 27 against 30 on the comeback for his opponent in Salvador. So I think that you've got a point where the age, maybe not really something that matters too much here. Both guys 30 or under, prospect territory. Seems like the kind of guys the UFC is normally looking to sign on a show like this. But then you look at the physical intangibles, that is something you like to see. I need to do my tape study to know, is he going to be able to leverage that, right? Does he use his distance? Is he going to be able to put those things into effect? But when you separate, certain data points from the stuff that you see in the cage, there's certain things that are a little bit more predictive over time. And the youth advantage, those size advantages, those are a little bit more predictive over time. So is it being factored into the line here? I'm not sure. He is the underdog here, despite having some of those advantages on paper. So he's definitely a fighter I'm going to look into. As far as the social medias go, this is an A-side favorite here for Dylan Salvador. So he is the favorite. He's the guy who's more well-known among the general public. So it actually makes sense to a certain degree as well. If people don't know you, they're not going to bet on you as frequently. That's something that we know. My guy Blake Perry gave an honest effort there against Makoa Cooper, but nobody had ever heard of him, right? And a Cooper brother, I've heard of that name. That sounds more familiar. Those are the kind of things that draw casual betting attention. And so I always look at that as well. But in this case, both of these guys, less than 10,000 followers. Neither one of them's lighting the world on fire. So it's really going to be about the fighting ability here. And I got to do a little bit more research, but just wanted to share with you guys some of the intangible notes that I had taken so far. And when I have a stronger opinion, I'll share it. But I just don't want to, give you guys something I don't have.
Hey, well, we know we like those intangible notes. So those are something we should take into account when we are breaking down these fights. And so, some other things really to look at here is, especially on Dana White Contender Series, the main question I have is, what's this level of competition like, right? And we look at it here, and it seems like Salvador is someone who is going to have maybe an edge in that regard, right? Having the experience in kickboxing bouts. And although Oki's going out there and looking good in his performances, I mean, combined opponent record of 48, 49, and 1, that's a negative record for his opponent. It's not something you always want to see. He does have some decent performances at that, but still, there are a lot of things we have to go out there and see. In my eyes, what I'd like to see is the fighter going forward in this fight. I do expect to have more success here, right? Whether that be Oki pushing forward, looking to land some shots against the fence, implement some grappling, to use some control time here, that could be a path to victory. And whereas Salvador does seem to start slower, as the fight goes on, he picks up that pressure. And I do think if he does so, he's able to have some success late against Oki, a guy who I didn't like what I was seeing when he's on the back foot. I think he's a much more superior fighter on that front foot, being the aggressor. And I think that bodes well for him if he's able to do so. So what I'm trying to say here, though, is I think Dylan Salvador has more paths to getting it done, whether that be taking over late with some pressure, having the better overall technical striking, having the ability to land some tricky submissions on the mat himself. But there's also a lot of ways I see him losing, right? If he's pressured and giving up that first round, that physicality of Oki can be a problem. If he's willing to play off his back and be controlled, I'm not a fan of Salvador's takedown defense. So there's another path for Oki as well. What I'm saying is I'm picking Salvador to win. I don't trust him enough at this price tag to go out there. I think there's a lot of things you have to look at. I think maybe we can attack the prop market in this one instead, because I do think that the path to victory here are more clear. I think if Oki's going to win this fight, it's going to include his physicality, and most of the time it's going to come by decision, usually pressure-based or wrestling-based, which, well, if I have the odds up, let's see what that line is here. By decision for Oki, plus 340. I don't think that's a bad way to look at it. Whereas if I think Salvador is going to have success down the stretch, well, Salvador in round 3, not a good number, but him pushing the pace late is something I'd like to see. Overall, I think Salvador has more paths to getting it done. He is going to be the pick for me, but I wouldn't be surprised in upset. And if this line continues to climb for Oki, I might have to jump on there if he's able to use his physicality to his advantage.
And our guy Just Win in the comments did note that Dominance MMA, if you know, you know. I'm not sure who he's talking about for this one. I would guess it has to be Dylan Salvador, because our guy Obi does have Paradigm Sports represented in his bio on Instagram. So interesting note there. Are you talking about Salvador, Rich? That would be a curious note, because I didn't see anything directly linking him, but that would be curious. You know how the Dominance MMA brand works, but we can move to the next one if you're ready, Gordo.
No, we do for sure. That was a fun fight, and is what I'm looking for. He does agree. He does say yes in that regard. So another interesting tidbit there. I do think he maybe being brought in as the A side is just there are holes in both these fighters' games that I think can be exploited. Not one I want to go out there and throw my hard-earned UFC Singapore money on, right? So, but we'll see where this line ends up traveling. Shout out to everybody in here. Kristen's hanging out, Zen Monkey, Mushrooms hanging out, Cole saying hi to him, and Justin Baby, like we mentioned. Let's move on to unfortunately, guys, I hate to break it to you, but this next bout is what peak male human performance looks like. All right, these are two shredded fighters going at it. This is what you want to look at when you're going out there and seeing weigh-ins. No, I'm just kidding. This is a pretty ugly one. We do have ourselves a heavyweight match, one with a pretty big fighter on both sides here. Thomas Peterson being the taller fighter, but both these guys got their guts in them. It's an interesting one to break down, but the big elephant in the room is that minus 500 price tag for Thomas Peterson. Flip side of things, Chandler Cole, Ultimate Fighter alum, plus 365 on the return. It seems like a matchup where they're setting up this guy in Peterson who's got all wins, pretty dominant, except for that one against a surging prospect in Waldo Cortez Acosta, who did have success. A guy they're kind of setting up here against a guy in Cole who has been finished in the first round, who has been dominated in other regional scenes. It seems like there is a clear A side here. And for that reason, I do think the most likely outcome is Thomas Peterson uses that aggressive style, uses that ground game, takes down Cole and finishes him early. But am I getting any value by trusting a guy who slows down after round one, who I think has holes in his own right, and doing all this at a minus 500 price tag? This is not a pretty fight, my friend. This is not one where I think Peterson's necessarily a parlay leg, but one where I'm definitely interested in violence here. I do think one way or the other this fight does go. I'll probably end up targeting 1.5 rounds because Peterson comes out shot pretty early, like shoot those takedowns, very aggressive ground and pound on top, and he's going to have a very big size advantage. And this is one where if he's not able to have success early on, maybe Chandler Cole can take over. But one where really I'm interested to hear your opinion on this one.
Yeah, man. I taped this one last thing before we got on the air, and I think, I get where the line is. Just in the sense that Thomas Peterson looks like an athlete, right? He just looks like an athlete. He looks like a guy who's, a pretty typical UFC fighter, right? Not a guy who's going to blow you away, right? His physique isn't something to write home about, but you just look at him and go, okay, yeah, he kind of looks like a heavyweight that would be in the UFC. I don't see that with Chandler Cole personally. It doesn't look like an athlete to me. I'm not trying to be disrespectful. He's more athletic than he looks, right? Like, don't judge a book by its cover. Kind of a little bit of that Chris Barnett situation, right? He'll still do a standing backflip, but he doesn't look like he would be able to. I don't think of Cole in quite that same way, but he is out there shooting single legs. He does move with some dynamism. He does get back up to his feet at times when he's on the ground, but I just don't really see it with this guy, honestly. I think number one, he gets to that position on his knees frequently where he's just stuck, right? Like he can't get back up very explosively. Guys are like holding his head down. He's like reaching out, grabbing the foot, and he's just getting held down and punched in the side of the head until the fight's over kind of deal. Like just a few things that are really concerning for me. And then watching his wins, most of them are first round finishes against guys who don't look like they would ever have a hope nor prayer of winning a fight in the octagon. So it just, for me, it seems like there is one guy being brought in to win. And what's ironic, though, is that the social media A side is Chandler Cole, right? He's just a guy who's a little bit more everyman. He seems like a guy that more people can maybe relate to. Peterson doesn't seem like a guy who's maybe a ball of charisma, right? But his fighting skill, I think, is there. And I think that's the ultimate difference here. I think he's a better fighter. I think he's way more athletic. And I think he's probably going to knock this guy out in the first round. But I also think that he could take him down more often than Cole could take him down, right? So I think Cole on the top position is okay. I think on the bottom position, he's liable. And I think Peterson can probably do whatever he wants. He will probably take the back in this fight. So, take a look at the prop market, do whatever that information you wish. But definitely some things I'll be taking a look at.
Now, this is a horrible aged comparison, especially after last weekend's events. But you know who this fight optically reminded me of was the Dana White Contender Series bout between one Jared Vanderaa and Harry Hunsucker. Like it just seems like visually.
That's what we call the bottom of the barrel. Yeah,
it is. And both these fighters have their flaw, but you seem like you have one guy who's far larger than the other, who's going to have a ground advantage versus a guy who doesn't take damage that well and shells up. It seems like what we kind of got here. And after Vanderaa dropped to light heavyweight and lost his last bout this weekend, not something you want to reference too much, but it is one where I do think we have an ace side. I do think gets him out of there early, and I do think he can do so in a multitude of ways. I just do think he has that power. He has such a good finishing ability in top position, and I do not like what I see from Cole absorbing damage. He's been finished early on a lot of the time. This does seem like a matchup where Thomas Peterson can have success early on, and I don't know how I'm going to target it for now, but I do know I'm going to want some early action on this one, probably under 1.5, probably pay the juice for that, just because I do think we do see a dominant showing early on from Thomas Peterson, who does have the edge in a lot of metrics here. So, interesting matchup, large favorite, but I do think we do have ourselves a large favorite for a reason. Now, I'm going to ask you, man, Chandler Cole, what's his win condition here? Do you think it has to be an early Hail Mary KO, or does he have the cardio to outlast Peterson and hopefully find something late?
Truthfully, I'd have to do a touch more due diligence on the Peterson side. I didn't really see him in many extended fights. He's a little bit too dynamic for that in some of these fights, right? Like the other guy's trying to be patient, keep the distance, and then he lands a big one too, and the guy's asleep. So it's just like he's kind of had a hard time going deeper into these fights because of athletic upside. When I did see Cole getting into these extended fights, I thought it looked bad. I thought he was slowing down. I thought he was looking worse and worse. And I don't feel like what he showed me was like, oh yeah, if I could extend this fight, like that's, I'm going to blow him out of the water. I feel like it'd be a 50-50 fight at best if they were both completely gassed out. Do you know what I'm saying? So that just seems to me like I don't see Cole having a big cardio edge here. And I feel like the wrestling is what makes him tired, despite him being the one that presses it, right? And I just think against Peterson, he's going to face a lot of resistance in the wrestling. I don't think that that's going to be something he could easily go to here. So, it was on the Ultimate Fighter that he got finished in the 3rd round, correct?
Yeah.
And yeah, in that one he looked bad. He just didn't look good. It's my humble opinion. I don't think he looks like a very good fighter.
Yeah, and the physiques there definitely Crystal's pointed out there. That's peak male performance right there. I don't care what you guys say. Be warned of that archetype right there. But no, shout out to him hanging out there, to Easy as well, to Mushroom. Shout out to everybody for hanging out here. Let's keep it moving. And this next one's a cool one for me. That last one was a nice -500 to kind of gloss over, but this next one will be one we talk about. And we do have ourselves a Canadian fighter. Right? Canadian fighter. Fun fact, we do have 2 Canadians on the DWCS Contender Series next week. We'll talk about it there when it comes, but this one's especially interesting because on one side of things, we do have the 8-2 Mateo Vogel versus the 6-1 Timothy Cuamba. You're doing the tape, you're doing the research, you're going through Instagram pages, and I'm like, man, this Mateo Vogel guy looks really familiar. And here's where things get interesting. And here's where you guys can rip on me for my sort of things, because I by no means am a fighter. I'm no means a grappling guy, but I had some friends like to roll. I went into the jiu-jitsu gym a couple times back in Ottawa, and guess where it was? It was at New Era Combat Sports. It was in Ottawa. It was where Mr. Vogel does train here. So interesting. I'm not very good at it, but I did go out there, did train. I'm like, this gym looks familiar. It is the only one I've been to. So interesting stuff there, fun stuff. But it is a guy that I'll definitely be looking to support. And you go out there and you look at the tape and it's like, okay, this guy has his flaws, but he's a dog, man. He's able to fight some decent opponents, battle through adversity. And he is very, very slick on the mat. If maybe I stick around and was able to pick up some skills he had, I'd have some good jiu-jitsu in my back pocket as well, because black belt there, that seems to be where he wants to take these bouts. And he seems to have some decent success doing so. Submitted Garen Armfield, who had a good fight last week in there as well. He's a guy who looks to have his bread and butter on the mat and has the durability, cardio, and resiliency to do whatever it takes to get it there. But in doing so, in knowing a guy has good cardio and resiliency, it means that he's probably getting beat up on. And his striking defense is definitely something to be improved. He doesn't look like the most talented Chris striker on the feet. And although it's definitely an area for concern, he does whatever he takes to get it on the mat because he knows that's where he wants it. He's able to fight adversity. Super, super durable guys, what you want to see. And he's probably going to need that here against a guy Cuamba, who seems to be the superior striker. He's a very young fighter. You watch the tape. He's got some very good boxing combinations. He likes to put it together. I think he has a decent foundation of that way. And I think he overall has a decent, well-rounded skill set, the ability to mix in takedowns, win minutes that way as well. But I think there is a clear advantage on the ground here for Vogel. I think he has the ability to win minutes that way, but also threaten positions and submissions from that way. And I do think that he is the rightful favorite in this spot. Now, with that being said, is there a world where Cuamba can go out there and land a jab from range and beat up Vogel for 15 minutes on the feet? There definitely is, but I think that the guy who's going to have the more opportunities to win the durability battle or resiliency battle for 15 minutes is going to be Vogel, and I think he's going to have the opportunity to try to catch Cuamba with something as the fight goes on, being the more battle-tested guy, being the guy with better cardio, and being a guy with such a advantage on the ground, in my opinion. So I'm excited to hear your opinion on this one. I am back in the Canadian fighter and a hometown guy for me at that. I hope to see him do well.
You know what, brother? I think that he is going to win the fight, but I think it's going to be another really, really tough one for him. You look back at Mateo Vogel's fight against Garrett Armfield, dude, his face turned into ground beef, right? Like he was literally getting tenderized in that fight for the duration of the standing portions. He's a very tough guy, but I don't like his striking defense, to your point. I think that he leaves himself a little bit open on the feet. He's definitely there to be hit. But he's a dog, he comes forward, he swings. And I did think it was really impressive to me that he was able to claw that win out, against, what's his name? Goodness gracious, against Armfield. Yeah, I thought that was a really impressive win. And then on the other side, the thing that concerns me for a guy like Cuamba, and he's a big underdog here, right? So he doesn't need to check as many boxes for you, for you to support him. But just looking at the Cuamba side, he's been submitted via rear naked choke twice, once as an amateur and once as a professional. And the one as a professional was in 2021, October, so fairly recently. And against Ivan Tenya, doesn't look like a bad fighter. I think he's 6-1 as a pro. I'm not really super familiar with his work, but he looked like he was a good enough grappler there. But he kind of just seemed like he was hanging his head, shooting for takedowns. And just leaving himself out there in some grappling positions. That was in 2021. And just seems like Vogel's the kind of guy who could punish you if you put yourself out of position in the grappling. And also, what's his specialty? The rear naked choke, right? Like he was getting pieced by Garrett Armfield, but he had one good position, right? He almost got it in round 1. He got it in round 2. He finished. So it's just a guy that seems like he's a pretty binary win condition, right? And he did open a minus 300 favorite here. It's been cut in half, right? So definitely some sharp support, I would say, coming in on the Cuamba side. But I think there was a point of, diminishing returns, right? A point where the bet no longer has value. So I think sharps definitely absorb plus 200 and above on this Cuamba guy. He's physical. He's athletic. He can wrestle. He can strike better than Vogel. So for those reasons, like definitely a live underdog. But just gut feeling here, I think Cuamba's going to be winning this fight until he gets submitted via rear naked choke. That's just how I feel. So I'm with you, brother. What is the props here on this fight?
The submission line isn't looking too good. That's the first thing I looked at.
Ever would I take that? No.
Yeah, and even
this
the
fight
later
looks like
round
Blackshear
props
versus Vogel, says Rich. If you want a dog on the card, here it is. Good BJJ for sure, but bad off his back. Too much love for the Armfield comeback. Yeah, I think that might be fair. Although he's not getting any love in the market, right? Like it's going all one-way traffic right now. That's something I'm going to look into a little bit as well. See if there was any points of resistance because I haven't really studied this market too well. It opens minus 300, instantly dropped to a minus 125, pretty quickly. And now it's settled back out around a minus 160. So really interesting line move here. It seemed like they got nuked and it almost flipped, and then they got some bite back on the Vogel side. Yeah, Vogel could be sub or bust here. I think that maybe the money line pricing dynamic is wrong here, but it does just feel to me like one of those fights where, the guy could look like a favorite until he loses via sub in in kind of a routine fashion. So it's a tricky one for me. I'm going to do a little bit more studying here, but Cuamba definitely has some flaws in the grappling, but plus 175, I mean, it's not going to get me excited. Even if it's, the guy who won the Mundials and the guy who won ADCC, it's like, yeah, plus 175. I mean, it's got to be Neil Magny. It's got to be somebody that's just going to give one to you, I'm playing. You got to take a Neil Magny shot once a week,
You got to make sure, man. You got to go for the legs now, too, after all, too. Man, those Ian Gary submission tickets. Oh, well. We do have ourselves one here where I'll give some bite back to Rich here. I do think that, yeah, it has all the potentials to look like that Blackshear fight. You have a guy in Cuamba who's going to be the superior striker, and I fully admit that. The problem I have here with comparing it to Blackshear is we have a guy in Blackshear who's never been finished, super durable, very apt on the ground as well, where I do think Cuamba does have his mistakes. We also think we have a very low level of competition at his end as well at 12-7. So although he does have his path to victory, I don't think there's enough, let's say, proof or evidence that he can survive these grappling exchanges and survive the heavy pace and pressure of Vogel for 15 minutes in order to make him the favorite. And I think if you want a dog shot, take it. I'm not saying go against it. I just think if I have to pick a winner in this one, it's going to be the guy who I see with a clear path to victory, and one that a lot of the time will revolve around Cuamba making a mistake, which I do think he can do down the stretch. I love the cardio for Vogel. I do think he'll push a heavy pace, and I do think he'll do whatever it takes to get it to the mat. He may not have success there, but that's going to be my pick for an overall outcome. It is an interesting one, and I do wish everyone the best of luck with that one. I will take my Canadian on that side. Go ahead, Liam.
I was just going to say, I think that if you're taking the dog shot, you might want to sprinkle that plus 600 on the KO. I mean, I just feel like if what's his name? Oh my God, I'm so bad with these names today, guys. Sorry. Cuamba. If Cuamba is winning this fight, I feel like he's winning it by knockout vast majority of the time. It has seen some love on Bet Online, just because when you look at Vogel, like even the fights where he wins, the guy's face looks like a complete wreck. You see the photos he takes with his hand up, it's normally with two swollen eyes and whatever. He's a tough bastard, but just like I do think eventually that bill comes due. So that's all I would say is on both sides, I feel like there's a pretty clear path to victory, and I think it's the sub for Vogel. And I think on the other side, Cuamba, if this fight finishes inside the distance, I think he's a big knockout threat here.
Yeah, I don't mind it. Maybe a little bias, my Vogel as well. No, only va Canada. It's his time to shine too as well. With being in Ottawa, I think he's got. I looked over his Instagram, some Gatineau as well. So a
Canada
good guy.
needs a
Look
new
to.
prospect, Gordo. Let's
They
go.
do, man. They do. Hopefully, we get one here. But I understand the worries are there. That striking defense. I just do like his pace. I was more so thinking a victory for Cuamba means stuffing takedowns, jabbing him from range, and winning a decision that way. I guess in that part as well, though, you're looking at a lot of risk if you're trusting Cuamba to do that, because it only takes him one slip up on the mat. It only takes him. He may not be winning the optics if the pressure is coming from Vogel. And the one thing you got to give him as well is, aside from that submission upside, great cardio, great durability. He is always going to be a threat. So maybe you do have to get him out of there. Either way, super fun fight. I love it. Who knows where I'll get in the betting line? Maybe you sit back and watch it and cheer for my Canadian guy. I was hoping for a better line in the submission, but either way, fun fight. That'll be the pick there. All right. We'll keep it moving to our co-main event. I'm going to butcher this name right here. 5-2 UC Yusri Belgaroui. Yeah, I like that one. Marco, Tulio, Silva, a very fun fight. You know what? I've been talking a bunch. Let's give this stage to my co-host here, and Liam, you break this one down for me.
This is a fascinating one, brother. As far as I'm concerned, on the one hand here, we've got our guy Belgaroui. He kind of fits the mold of some guys that I've backed in the past, right? Different pricing, though, much different pricing dynamic. You look at Cesar Almeida, right? And what did I tell people? I was like, do I know for sure that this guy is going to hold up on the mat? No. But do I know that he's working with the right people? Yes. Do I know that he has the right experience? Yes. Do I know that the UFC would love the natural built-in storylines of the rematches? How does this play out in these gloves versus these gloves? How does it play out with the addition of grappling? Do people start shooting takedowns? Like, that's what becomes interesting. Also, what do MMA fans claim they want? Two guys that'll stand and bang, and that's what they're trying to cultivate with these guys that they bring in from the kickboxing scene that get some takedown defense and then work on their game from there. And you look at a guy like Belgaroui, and my danger here for him is that I do think he's a little bit tall. He's a little bit off balance at times. He normally does a pretty good job keeping people away, framing off, using his work. But sometimes if he just gets like pushed to the fence, like he's a little noodly, right? He's just a little bit, you could tell he's got more of a kickboxer build than like a MMA fighter build. A lot of MMA fighters have a little bit more thickness to him. Even a guy like Adesanya, right? Longer, lankier, but he's got that musculature. You could tell that he's still built up. This is a guy who I feel like is still kind of building into himself. He's at 6'5" with a really long length. He's kind of not going to be that thick and strong ever, but he does seem to me like a guy who is at a big strength disadvantage here against Tulio. But on the other side, I think Tulio's a little bit slower. Tulio can be knocked out. It's happened to him before. So really interesting fight here. When I look at how the UFC is putting this together, I think they're kind of thinking it's a no-lose situation. You look at Tulio's last couple of fights, he's knocking out dudes that are big, tall, knocking them all over the place. He's got a lot of power in his hands, not afraid to come forward and throw against bigger guys. Could that get him knocked out here? Yeah. But could that also get him a knockout win? I mean, crazier things have happened. It's a very closely lined fight as well. So I think that this is one where the line is flipped, right? I think it opened up a plus 135 and it's flipped to a minus 138 now on the Belgaroui side. Belgaroui, I believe, is the A side here on social media by a significant degree. 2x, 34.9 K followers. That's the most on the card. So he's definitely the most popular fighter. A little bit surprising to see him not in that main event feature here. He's also going to have the frame advantage here. 5 inches taller, 6'5", massive frame, and a 78-inch reach, which will be a 7-inch advantage here over his opponent. He's going to be landing from far away. He does have good, precise shots. He can put a jab together. He could throw good low kicks. He could chop people down from a pretty far distance. He's got good knees. He's got good ways of intercepting shorter opponents as well. He could dig an underhook, but I don't think that he's like going to blow you. If this gets into extended grappling situations, I do think he's going to look a little bit dicey, to say the least. I think he's a guy that wants to keep everything at distance on the feet. He's tried at times to mix in some offensive wrestling. Dude, it looks like Dookie. I hope that he has learned to not do that and just keep space at all times. Because when he's keeping space, it looks pretty. He looks good. But when he's in close, it looks ugly sometimes against lower level fighters, but it seems like a lot of the public here is liking Silva. He's a scary guy, and he just knocked out some big, tall, lanky guys. But I do think this is a different caliber of opponent. I do think this is a better striker, and I do think it's a guy that has a lot of confidence, right? He trains with the right people. He does a lot of the right work. He seems like he's a guy the UFC would like to add to the roster. Give me Belgaroui. I think he gets the job done, but I think it's a tricky one, man. And I do kind of lean towards the under 2.5 here as well. I think both these guys are dangerous, and I feel like Silva probably going to be swinging some hammers, putting it on the line. And in addition, I think he's going to try and wrestle. I think if he does that, he could gas himself out here. So I feel like this fight's probably going to end inside the distance.
There you go. Decent breakdown there. I just got to shout out one thing first. Daz shouting it out with the dono here, beer money for next shoey, and that is the first dono on the Plays and Fades YouTube channel. So I appreciate you, Jazz. Thank you for all that. Also, shout out you out for the win there. I appreciate you. Gotta get another shoey in there sometime. Where's Tuivasa getting his wins when you need him, right? But no, I appreciate you, Daz. Much love. All right, my side of things here is another really interesting matchups. First of all, that height discrepancy is wild. 6'5". Very interesting to see a guy with a decent pedigree as well in that kickboxing. You know, like you mentioned, that new wave of kickboxers there. They fought the Pereiras, they fought the Adesanyas, and they're trying to bring him in here to have some success that way. He seems like someone they could build a story around. Flip side of things, it's not like Silva's not, right? Shoot the box as well. Aside from the shoot the box talent and pedigree as well, decent defensive ability, very powerful figure as well. Both these guys look like the guys that they could do well with winning. And it looks like both guys who could have success at the UFC, but both these guys aren't without their flaws. I think Belgaroui has that, although he has a ton of durability, like you mentioned, tall man's defense, he can be hit, and it's phased him so well so far, but he's also got a combined opponent record of 22 and 23. No one's tested him to the point that Silva would. And for that reason, when I'm going out there and I'm seeing the flaws in the takedown defense, the flaws in the striking defense, I could see a lot of success for Silva. But what's looming so large for me in my mind is when I'm watching these fights, especially the one where he lost, a lot of lull in the fight. Right, a lot of time where he was sitting back and then overextended on his strikes and then not reacting too well to the punch coming back his way. And now I know he's made improvement since then. I know he's been really succeeding since then, but that image of him overextending and then being caught with things or being knocked out here is something that you don't want to see against a guy in Belgaroui who does have such slick counters, who does have the range to keep people at bay. And for that reason, it's kind of scaring me off of the underdog price tag here. Now, that being said, those who got in early on Silva, shout out to you. I think that's a great opportunity. Plus 120, plus 125. That's a great way to do so because I do think he has more paths to victory and getting it done, whether it be with the ground game, whether it be with the pressure, whether it be with power in his own right against the questionable striking defense of Belgaroui. The problem I have here is I'm having that image over and over my head of Belgaroui being able to catch Silva the same way Silva was caught in his one loss. And in other fights where he is overextending, it does scare me to that point because there is some holes in his striking defense and his counter ability as well, with that being said. So I do think Silva has grappling upside. I do think he has more paths to getting it done, but the guy with more range, the guy with, like you said, the bigger following, the guy with good counters as well is going to be Belgaroui. And for that reason, I might have to side with you as well, Belgaroui, but this is truly a close fight. Probably lean towards the under as well, considering the defensive concerns for both guys and the power that they bring, but should be a very fun matchup. I talked a lot about the grappling aspect. You did mention you think Silva might tire if he does go there. What are the opportunities for a submission? Do you think Silva has the ability on the mat, like his shoot the box counterparts, to have success that way?
I mean, he opened up plus 800 here on Bet Online. It's down to a plus 300. So definitely some love coming in on that submission prop. I do think it's a little wide. You go back and look at the tape for Belgaroui. There's been multiple occasions where he's given his back in his fights, right? Like 2 hooks in. There was one guy on UAE Africa who had his back with like a rear naked choke locked in like 4 separate times, and he just kept peeling it. Like he just kept peeling it off, getting the hands. He seems like a tough guy who's not just going to give up on you, which is something I'd like to see. Here's something else I mentioned. Why did I fade Giga Chikadze? This is going to sound like a non sequitur, but stay with me here. Why did I fade Giga Chikadze against Calvin Kattar? Because Calvin Kattar had a proven resume over a long UFC sample size of outstriking his opponents, except for Max Holloway. So, like, Max Holloway kind of ruined his stats, but, like, most opponents that he had, he's outlanding them at boxing distance. That's just what he does. So, when you look at that, and then you say to yourself, Giga Chikadze is a guy who's had negative strike differentials since he was in kickboxing, right? You go back and look at his glory records. He wasn't that good at kickboxing in terms of, like, you know, not getting hit. right? He was good at the hitting. He's always been good at that. It's the not getting hit that he's struggled with. He was getting hit in Glory. He was getting hit in the UFC as well. And Calvin Kattar, by the way, isn't the first guy to outland him. He's been outlanded 3 times in the UFC, including Jamal Emmers, of all people. So you look at guys like this, not every kickboxer is built the same. Not everyone has the same style, right? This guy had a positive strike differential by a huge margin in kickboxing. He had a positive knockdown differential by a huge margin in kickboxing. He's a really legit striker with really legit credentials. And Silva, even though he got knocked out in that fight, in round 1, he looked like shit. Like he just looked terrible compared to that guy on the feet. That guy's like 7-4. He's a very average middling fighter in Brazil now. So again, when you look at how the UFC sets these things up, I think Silva's got a great record on paper. He trains with the right people, all those things. I don't think he's the same as every other shoot box guy. By the way, how'd that work out with Rolando Bedoya? Not trying to rub salt in wounds on some people, but I'm just saying, I did say it on all the shows last week that I did, where I was like, who the hell is a Rolando Bedoya? Just be like he's just a guy. Like he's literally just a guy that trains at shoot box. Like he's a purple belt from shoot box. Like, and everybody's like, he should be minus 300. He trains with the champ. It's like, based on what that he did. So for Silva, it's like, what has he done that I've been super impressed by? Not that much, but what he has, he looks physical. He looks strong. He looks like he's still training, getting better. He works with the right people. That's what I could say. But can I say that like he's proven it in the octagon against really high? No. So what I have seen, he's got some power, right? He could hit. He could deal with opponents of similar length. But how is that going to translate against somebody with his skills? I don't see it. I think that Belgaroui is probably one tier above him overall. And just as a fighter overall, I think he's probably one tier above him.
Hey, I don't mind that. I know you got Rich here agreeing with you. I did pick Belgaroui as well, but it does concern me with that let's say potential hole in his ground game. Maybe Silva isn't the guy to take advantage of that, but I do think not only the following, but the anthropomorphic advantages and the striking advantages go to Belgaroui. So I'll pick you as well as there. Oh, there we go. I appreciate it, guys. Let's shout out Rich right there. Yeah. 15 total. There we go. There's the first 3 donuts.
Welcome to America. Cheers.
Appreciate you all there. And then Cashville as well. Favorite 2 cappers. Appreciate you. Underdogs. Yes. Now we're going to cover them all at the end as well. I know we mentioned some opportunities for some underdogs to be live in the first couple, whether that be with, Cuamba having the ability to have success until he's not. I know I praise the ability for a decision win for Oki. We'll cover all that at the end as well. And we do have one last fight with one juicy underdog that maybe we'll talk about here as well. So very interesting. Appreciate all 3 of you guys. I love it. Let's keep her going. We got another one here. Main event, 16-6 Carlos Prates versus the 7-0 Mitch Ramirez. A few elephants in the room. One, great level of competition for Prates, big favorite coming in versus the guy Mitch Ramirez, who was kicked off the Ultimate Fighter by Mushroom. You too, man. I appreciate you, all of you guys, all 4 of you. Plays and fades on the way up. You guys are all awesome. We'll get you a Hail Mary that parlay for you as well, Mushroom. But yes, Mitch Ramirez, a guy who was kicked off the Ultimate Fighter to be replaced by one of Conor McGregor's guys, a guy who was supposed to be Ultimate Fighter, and then he wasn't. Does that show any indication of what the UFC thinks of him or where he is in the state? Either way, we do have him at a big underdog price tag. Maybe a grudge he's holding against people here. He's going to go out and have some success. Very, very interesting matchup here. I have nothing but good things to say about this fight. I think it's going to be very fun for as long as it lasts. And I'll pass this one over to you. Main event, man. How do you see this one going down? Do you agree with the line, or is there any likelihood for the underdog to have some success?
So I love a good underdog, right? I do love a good underdog, and I'm not always going to see them. I'm going to miss some, but in this case, guys, I wanted to like the underdog, and I didn't, right? I looked into it. I just didn't, right? What I do like is the plus money under. I think that this fight is going to end violently. I think that Mitch Ramirez is a guy that is going to come out, present himself, try and get in your face a little bit. You look at the Jeremy Holloway win, probably his best win, arguably his best win. And, it started with a low blow in the first round that was horrific, right? Like a gunshot goes off, guy hits the ground. Oh, God, rolling around and whatever. So I don't know exactly what to make of that. That can kind of throw off a whole fight. At times, Jared Gordon got kicked in the nuts and got finished instantly before in the UFC. Like, there's just been times I've seen that happen, and then the result isn't really indicative of how the fight would have went otherwise. So kind of throw that out from the sample. I watched his decision with Kenny Correa. Again, I don't mean to be reductive in my analysis, but who the hell is Kenny Correa, and why are you going to decision with him? And I watched the fight. He didn't look like anybody that we're missing, right? It doesn't look like contenders are going to be calling Kenny Correa next week either. So, with no disrespect, that's kind of just my read on this. I feel like you got one guy here who is, happy to go along, get along. I mean, he's got the right record on paper. Everything says he should be here, so to speak. But does he look like the most incredible athlete to me? He doesn't strike me necessarily as that. When I looked at the way in the face-off, Prates a little bit bigger, a little bit more imposing, a little bit more intimidating. Here's my notes on this fight. Excuse me, I'm on the wrong page here. I got a long document with a lot of notes, so sorry about that. Prates opened here at a minus 115. He's currently out to a minus 265 on Bet Online, so huge market move. And what we're talking about here as well is that there was some resistance at the minus 200 price, right? The love started to come back. And what happened? It got crushed, right? Whoever was resisting, it didn't matter, right? It kept moving. So as far as I'm concerned, I respect when markets are very aggressive. I respect when there's one-way movement on a fight, and then there's a sign of resistance that gets snuffed out, faster than you could say, ouch. So I think that Ramirez, it's not like he's a dead dog. He's got some skills. Prates is a guy who's been, finished many times, right? But I just think Prates right now is a really dangerous guy. He's on a 5-fight knockout streak. He looks better than he ever has. His takedown defense looks sharp. His head kicks are disgusting. He's got a very potent jab. He's got a knockout win on his record in his last few fights via the jab. Just landed a jab. The guy was like, where am I? Sat down, right? Like, this guy is punching very hard. I think he's fought better competition. I think he's a more battle-tested guy. I think he can mix it up in more realms of the fight as well. I think his jiu-jitsu is coming along okay. I don't think it's world-class, but I just think he's good enough at striking and dangerous enough in all phases that this is his fight to lose. So I understand the line moving his way, and I do kind of think he's probably going to finish this fight early. I think if he loses this fight, history tells us he's probably going to get finished in the first round. So kind of just lean towards the under here. I think it's going to be a showcase spot, and I think he's going to finish.
Hey, I have to say, man, not to give away my breakdown, but I agree. I've seen a lot of love for Ramirez, and while I understand he has some potential, man, I was really impressed with what I saw from the Prates guys, which is kind of scary, right? You're getting a big favorite in the main event. Those haven't really gone so well so far this year in Dana Contender Series, but man, I do think this guy has not only touch of death power, but like you said, momentum's in his favor. He's improving all these aspects of his games. And whereas he was taken down and finished before, his takedown defense is improving. I think he's working on his jiu-jitsu as well. And on the feet, not only is he aggressive, but he uses his length very well, a ton of power in his hands, and he's really getting a ton of reads wherever it's going. Nice explosiveness, athleticism as well. I overall really like his skill set, but he is someone who you're going to have to keep this fight in the feet for him. I do think he has his issues on the mat. I think a very dominant top control wrestler is going to have some success against him in the future. And I was potentially looking at the first few fights from Ramirez. You're like, okay, maybe this guy's potential to do so. I don't think he has the best entries in his takedowns. I think he can be hit as well. And I think that overall, if Ramirez is a fun guy to watch, I think he lacks a lot of things defensively that you want to see against a guy who is as dangerous as Prates. I think Prates has the ability to split the guard with his punches, land that head kick like he has a bunch of times before, and also have the, let's say, activity off his back to make Ramirez work, make Ramirez slow down, and have the ability to get the fight back up to the feet. Shall it ever go down to the mat? I also think that as the fight goes on, the guy who's landing a ton more volume, the guy who's going to be the pressure fighter, and a guy who's going to have more opportunities to finish the fight is Prates. And for that reason, although I'm looking for a reason to take a big, juicy underdog like this, I can't really find myself backing with Ramirez with too much confidence. Yes, I think there is a world where he's able to use his grappling and his takedowns to have success in that regards. I don't think it happens at too high of a clip. Instead, I think it's Prates going out there, using his power, using his volume, and his superior striking to have success in that realm. I do think he is someone who I think has success going forward, and I really do like this kid. I'm glad we see eye to eye, but how do you see him getting it done then? Do we think this is something we can attack the prop market, or is it one where you're just looking to eat the juice on this guy?
Let me take a look here and see what the props are looking like. Prates by knockout is only plus 115. By sub is plus 500 here. Um, I think it's probably going to be a knockout. So it's not great plus money. You're not getting great odds on the round one either. It's like plus 200. So I would almost be more apt to just take the under. Honestly, like when I look at a matchup like this, I say, how does he shit the bed here, right? Because Prates, you look at his record, it looks worse on paper than when you dissect, right? When you dig into some records, they look worse, right? Whereas when I dug into his record, it looked better. Yeah, he's got all these finished losses, but none since 2017, and no submission losses since 2014. And it's like you just keep peeling back the layers. And the decision loss, was pretty competitive in this year. So it's just like I look at this fight and I say to myself, Parates is probably going to be doing a lot of damage. I think he's going to put a hurting on him. And then I think it's going to be how Ramirez answers. Does he try and shoot takedowns? To Rich's point in the comments, respected BJJ black belt, factual. So I think that overall, his ground game is not as potent as his striking, but it's about what your opponent does as well. I think Ramirez is going to try and mix in the takedowns here because I wouldn't want to stand with Prates. He's got that dangerous southpaw double attack. He'll throw up the left high kick. He says, if you listen to the commentary on his fights, they talk about he tries to kick people in the arms as hard as he can from the outset. So that way their arms start to come down and it opens up his high kicks. His high kicks are disgusting. He times them beautifully. I just feel like the knockout is always going to be there. But I do think it's probably going to come earlier rather than later. He's a guy that's got big dynamism, comes out early, starts hot, and most of his finishes come in that first round, early in that second round. So for me, I feel like Prates is probably going to get the job done ITD here. I'm a square. What can I say? That's just how I feel.
and hey, I don't disagree with you. I agree with you completely. I'll be a square with you. But the one thing I will say in Ramirez's defense is we've never seen him finishes. We've never seen him lose in any regard at all. So for that reason, we don't know what way that comes. We don't know which way he's able to succumb. We don't know how he faces adversity at all. Does he shell up? Does he fight through it? We don't know. And for that reason, there is a bit more question marks behind that. I do think that he is a rightful favorite here, and he is someone who I like to back with deep conviction. I think he's gonna have some success here, especially if he goes out there and shores up that takedown defense. Like it looks like he's being able to do. Like his earlier fights, you do see having some troubles in that regards. Recently, man, he's been on fire, and I think he keeps that momentum going over a guy who the UFC cut from from the Ultimate Fighter for maybe a reason.
And think about how many guys, when they're getting stoppages with strikes, it's an accumulation. It's the guy quitting. It's somebody just like getting exhausted. He's knocking people the hell out. Like he's stiffening people with huge shots and really finishing them. So I would give him his just due, everybody. I think he's a dangerous fighter.
I tend to agree there, but 47 minutes in, that is going to do it for the core breakdowns here. Make sure to hit the like button down below, subscribe to the channel. Let's do some quick picks here. As we do every single week, we're going to go over what we have. We got shadow boxing leading. Those guys just want a jiu-jitsu fight. MMA in the future, who knows? If he faces someone with a build like Chandler Cole, maybe you'll have some success in that regards as well. But no, we'll keep it going. We'll give some quick picks here. I know we had some questions about some underdogs. We'll be sure to cover that. And then as well as Mushroom, we know we'll give them some Hail Marys here. So let's go down. I'll quickly go over these five myself. Very first fight of the night. I think this is a really close fight. And gun to my head, I do think Dylan Salvador is the rightful favorite. I think he has more paths to doing it. I think that if I look at all these underdogs, Oki's one of the ones I see having maybe more success than others because he does have the grappling path to victory. I think Salvador can be beaten by control time in the top position. With that being said, though, Oki can be pressured in his own regard. And for that reason, I do pick Salvador to win. I just don't agree with the line being where it is. If the line keeps climbing for an Oki decision, how to might get there, he may be one of my favorite underdogs this week, considering the favorites I do like. But the pick is going to be Dylan Salvador for now for having more paths to victory. I do think the guy getting off on their pressure approach should have some success here. This one's a shorter breakdown. I do think Thomas Peterson runs through him here. He is the larger guy, a good ability to land damage from top position. Chandler Cole does shell up. I do think Peterson gets him out of there early. If not, well, we've seen the last of Thomas Peterson. This next one's a really close one. And I, like Liam mentioned, I think Cuamba can have success until he doesn't. I do think he has a clear path to victory, and I do not discredit anybody for taking the shot on his money line at plus 130. With that being said, Vogel has got a clear path to victory, that being on the ground, great submission artist, and he is aggressive enough to the point where he could have success, and he has 15 minutes to do so with great cardio, great durability. It only takes one mistake for Cuamba, and for that reason, I have to pick Vogel. I do think if you are willing to take the risk of a Vogel submission there, Cuamba might be a decent underdog to back. Don't mind him there. This next one's interesting. I wanted to back Tulio Silva, but the more research, the more we look into the metrics, the anthropomorphic advantages, the followings, the way I see this fight playing out in my head. Belgaroui is going to have the opportunity to counter, to land at will, have more success in the strike in that regards. And as long as he either allows Silva to tire out in the grappling or defend some takedowns in his own right, I do think the counters will be there for them. I do think the power and kickboxing pedigree will work to his advantage, and I do think Belgaroui should win this fight. And last but not least, I do like Prates at a good rate. Very violent finisher, a lot of momentum, a guy I want to back here at a high clip. Very, very fun fighter. So in that regards, what I'm liking there. Quick picks, though, we'll go with Oki decision for a Hail Mary parlay leg for Mushroom. We'll go with Peterson round 1. We'll go with the Vogel submission, Belgaroui KO, and Prates KO, but I don't mind the shot on the submission like Rich mentioned there. Liam, what about yourself?
My brother, you're kind of speaking my language. I feel like, again, I disclosed at the beginning, if y'all are just tuning in, want to make sure it's very clear. I think Oki just strikes me as a kind of dog who would be live. Multi-ethnic fighter, very marketable in that regard. European as well, right? So like kind of represents a unique demographic. Also, you look at the guy on paper, he's got some physical intangibles, right? He's the bigger fighter. So I look at some of those things and I say to myself, man, this guy seems live. He looked like he was in great shape on the scales as well. But I got to do more due diligence on the fighting itself. So with that being said, he feels like a live underdog to me. Also, what better than to bust all the parlays right off the rip, let everybody have that chance to rebuild, right? You know what I'm saying? So I think that that's something to keep in mind. Oki, I believe, is live. I think that Peterson's going to roll here. I don't like to be a chalk donkey, not in the heavyweight division, most certainly. However, I just got to go with what I feel. I feel like Peterson's a much higher level athlete. I think he's better in terms of his well-rounded skill set. I think he reacts better to getting hit as well. So I just overall think he's a little bit more dangerous, a little bit more durable. Don't love the price given the other guys, the social media A side, but I think Peterson's going to win this one. And I just think he's kind of a guy who's not built for social media, right? He's just a guy who's good for cage fighting. And I think he's probably going to show that tomorrow. Vogel, I think, is the side, but I don't think at the price, right? I just think he's probably going to find a way to win this fight. He's experienced, he's gritty, he's tough, he's got wins over UFC caliber guys, he's got the clear path to victory. You know, his opponent's been submitted with rear naked chokes. He's got a nasty rear naked choke. He can get to that position, but he takes a lot of damage along the way. So it's going to be a sweat. When you're talking about a 65% indication, you don't want your guy's face turning into lunch meat, things like that. He did open at a 75% indication here as well. So it's been coming down steadily. I'm respecting a little bit of the market move here as well. I don't want to stand in front of a train, right? You stand in front of a train, you get run over. So I'm always going to pay attention to the market dynamics. If there's no, love that comes back on the Vogel side, I would be slightly concerned, right? There are people on the ground that have access to more information that could be betting the Vogel side back up. But if it doesn't happen, I'm going to have to ask myself, why? Where are they? And what am I missing? So lean towards Vogel, but a lot of sharp people and the market is saying Cuamba is a very live underdog here. When you look at this next fight, I think Belgaroui is, sneakily the side here, right? I think he flipped to chalk. Nobody's picking him, and he's flipped to chalk, right? That's something that's a pretty big sign for me. Then I look at the Belgaroui side, and he's got the physical intangibles. He's the way bigger social media side. He's the biggest social media side on the card, and he opened as a dog, flipped instantly to a favorite, and now it's just been doing a little bit of this. Staying the same, minus 125 to minus 160, bouncing. He's the favorite, though. No amount of love coming back on the dog has flipped that line back. I find that interesting. It suggests to me the under. It suggests to me Belgaroui is the side. Finally, in the main event, I think that we've got a favorite that has been one-way traffic. I think he's the right side, unfortunately. I think we've missed the number, right? Now you're talking about 70% indication on a guy who's been knocked out multiple times in the first round. How greasy do you want to get on the Contender Series? But just talking about skill set, I think he's a better fighter. I think he's the better fighter in all positions. I think he's a little bit more experienced and proven against better guys. So when I look at his intangibles on paper, I think he's got to be the side here. Better on social media, better attributes physically, more dynamic striker, southpaw, tricky, multiple attacks from multiple positions, finishing people with kicks and punches. Seems like the more dangerous guy. So give me Prates in the under. That'll do it.
And hey, we know where to find those picks, right? Liam Picks Fights. You got a wealth of knowledge there. Make sure to check him out on Twitter as well. But 54 minutes in, that's gonna do it, man. We still got a few things left to plug here, and I'll be the first one to plug things because we got the UFC Paris card coming up this weekend. And I mentioned earlier in the week I'll have a special guest going on this week. Liam, a friend of your show. I haven't done a show with him yet, but for a card in Paris, for a card in France, I'm a French guy. Let's get another French guy on here. Me and Daravi will be breaking down this card. It'll be in English. Don't worry, but we'll have we need to get some good French pronunciation, especially from him there as well. So that'll be a good one I'll be doing later this week. So make sure you're subscribed to the channel down below. A ton of UFC DWCS Contender Series content. And as always, we're going to be breaking down these fights 11 p.m. Eastern every single Monday night. We have 6 weeks to go, including next week, week 5 on Liam's channel. It's a fun card. Quickly, just looking over without doing any tape, 2 Canadians for me, which is great. And in the fights that don't include Canadians, you do have an 11-0 Argentina prospect versus a 10-2, a Brazilian prospect. Really fun fight there. Main event, Bruno Lopez, 11-0, fun fight as well. And then even some South African talent as well in Chad Hakanam. Fun card next week. Make sure to check out Liam's channel. Subscribe to him at LiamPicksFights. We'll be there next Monday, 11 p.m. EST, like I mentioned. But Liam, let them know what else you have going on this week, where to find the rest of your work, and truly appreciate you coming on the show once again. And congratulations on your win this weekend.
Thanks so much, brother. I appreciate it. You guys can find all my stuff at LiamPicksFights everywhere. That's on Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube, most especially. If you guys haven't already, make sure you're subscribed to the channel because you don't want to miss me and Gordo breaking down Contender Series. But also, I do my own shows throughout the week. Liam's First Look, Bets and Banter with a bunch of sharp guests, including our guy Gordo. He's been a friend of the show many times. So that's what I pride myself on, talking about these fights, mostly the UFC and Dana White Contender Series, but we sprinkle in all the MMA knowledge that we can. And if you guys are interested in watching a grappling match, I did just post my full match from over the weekend. So it was a fun one. Glad to go out there and compete. And if you guys have feedback, constructive criticism, things I can work on, student of the sport. So right back into the training room tomorrow to get better. So if you guys have feedback, I appreciate that too. So God bless. I appreciate all the support. You guys were overwhelming with it. A lot of kind words and support in the chat tonight as well. So thank you all. Very kind-hearted individuals. I hope you guys crush Contender Series tomorrow. Let's keep getting after it. If you guys want to go deeper into my work, I do very detailed write-ups, articles, breakdowns, bets for all these cards. It's all on Patreon as well. So all my stuff is available. You can easily find it, and I appreciate all the support.
Hey, man, you deserve it. Congratulations once again on that win. Appreciate it, everybody hanging out. Make sure to hit the like button down, subscribe to the channel. As much from saying, great chat as well. Appreciate all you guys hanging out. Daz, you as well. Liam's Woods fights, I'll take the gambles there. So we just broke down every single fight for Dana White Contender Series week 4. Quickly before I leave, shout out everybody, especially for the first donos on the Plays and Fade YouTube channel. Really do appreciate that. Daz, Cashville, Rich, and Mushroom. You guys are all beauties. And everybody else hanging out as well. I appreciate you guys supporting me as always. Full card breakdown for UFC Paris will be out tomorrow on the Plays and Fade YouTube channel. And then a full card breakdown with Dravi will be live Thursday night, 9 p.m. I will post announcements for that. So check out my Twitter. My full card of bets will also be out tomorrow prior to the fight. So I hope everybody enjoys. I hope everyone picked up on some knowledge that me and Liam were spitting throughout the video. Again, hope you guys enjoy the fights tomorrow. Let's make some money, guys. Peace.